what are the most competitive categories, maybe for 2023?
IPAs still do kind of dominate. I don't think they quite double. They get close to doubling those right behind American IPA category. That was for its first year on the competition was the second largest category, right behind that juicy hazy IPA category. But then, what I find interesting behind that, right behind the IPAs, you always have this shuffle between traditional lagers like German Pilsners, Bohemian Pilsner. There's always a really strong like wooden barrel aged category that kind of ranks like fifth. But most interestingly, this year in 2023, the third largest category right behind those IPA categories, and actually larger than the American IPA category, was.
Thank you so much for watching. Your views and support make these conversations entirely possible. Now, hitting that subscribe button is also transformative to the channel, but oddly, 73% of you have not done so yet. So if you like what you see, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons to fuel our growth, our clout, and our ability to attract even more awesome guests. Thank you and cheers. Well, welcome everybody. I am thrilled to have Chris Williams today. He's the director of the Brewers Association competitions, and Chris has endured me in several competitions and at several meetings, but we've never had a chance to really talk shop. We generally are talking about what's going on at the moment. And I've been looking forward to a moment to give Chris a chance to gather his thoughts and have a little break from a bunch of competition. So, Chris, first of all, welcome. I appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Well, thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Well, I've been looking forward to it for some time because we've had this scheduled a while, and I know how busy you are. and I guess that busyness is what a lot of people don't appreciate, because you do more than just maybe the most famous competitions that we're aware of, which is the Great American Beer Festival and maybe more importantly, the World Beer Cup. Most of us have heard of that, but you do a lot more than that, don't you?
Well, that is what takes up the majority of time. It's funny, those big competitions. I'm responsible for organizing the three large now annual competitions that we do at the Brewers Association. Like you mentioned, the Great American Beer Festival competition, the World Beer Cup competition, and the National Homebrewers competition. And those, between the three of those, it is a year-round thing. We wrap up Great American Beer Festival, and we start in with World Beer Cup, and somewhere in the middle we throw in the National Homebrew competition too. So it is a full-time, ongoing year-long thing.
And how many entries would you say are all three combined? Just wild guess.
Oh gosh, we range in that like 20 to 25,000 entry amount between the three of them.
And each one of those might have, what, 3 or 4 beers?
Oh yeah, a number of like each brewery, yeah, they might enter anywhere from like 1 to 10, not honestly. So, but generally speaking, we see about an average of like 4 beers per.
So is that like 100,000 bottles or cans?
Yeah, oh yeah, it is. Yeah, when we get that stuff, we usually get anywhere from like 4 to 8 bottles or cans. So yeah, it's like 100,000 per competition. That's why it takes so long to get them all organized and sorted before we can judge them.
Well, and as a judge, though, I never see that. It just, someone nicely puts one down on the table, and I don't even see all that in the background. It's all invisible. But wow, 100,000 bottles and cans of beer. That's just to process accurately, because you gotta keep them anonymous, right?
Yep, we got a great team. We spend a lot of time doing it. They're very thorough and got a lot of good people helping to do it. So,
well, a question I'm asked regularly, and I would love to get your answer on it. And they say, "Oh my gosh, you've judged the Great American Beer Festival. What's the best beer you ever had?" Now, I have kind of a pat answer that I won't give out because I want everybody to think it's original. But sure. I'd love to know what you say, because your visibility is 100,000 beers. Plus, you just came back from Japan, right?
I did, yep. My favorite beer, gosh, without getting into specifics, it's always a well-made one and one you can have a few of, and the best one is the one you can enjoy some good times with friends with. So, that's what I like, something that's good, well-made, clean, and you kind of want to have a few more of. So
Yeah, it's the setting seems to have a lot to do with it, and
sure does.
you have a delicious beer and a fabulous setting and a good friend. Boy, there's just nothing like it. Well, that's a lot of what is done at the competitions that you're in charge of, and amazingly, I've gotten to judge at some of those competitions, but a lot of people really don't know the qualifications and might even think, "Gosh, if Doug can do it, anybody can get in there." What are the qualifications? Can you kind of go through that a little bit?
Yeah, well, don't sell yourself short, the predominant number of judges on our panel, they have a professional brewing background or some sort of technical qualification in the industry. Um, all the time we're looking for industry experts that what we usually say is they need formal sensory training. So that could be anything from, those higher level, think about like Cicerone training courses or high level BJCP, like, Grand Master and above, things like that. Some exceptions are made to sort of that industry background if they do have a very exceptional judging background or sort of, beer or sensory training like food sciences, things like that. But we really, that's really what we're looking for is sort of like a formal background. Did they go to school for this? Do they, have one of those very formal sensory trainings like beer sommelier program, usually in Germany, things like that. And then we ask for ongoing sensory training. So are they doing, weekly, monthly sensory panels at the brewery or, whatever maybe supplier they work at to kind of like keep that palate honed and make sure it's sharp. And we just make sure it's people who are active and kind of have a good pulse on what's going on in the industry, a big depth of understanding of all beer styles so that they kind of know what's expected, different flavor and aroma outcomes for different styles. So, you fit into that, so don't sell yourself short. But, that's a big, it is sort of daunting to go down that road. But in the end, we're really fortunate to have the folks that we do on the panel and continue to get really new and really impressive people each year. So, yeah, I'd say it's an honor to be on that panel, but it's an honor to get to meet these people during the competitions as well because they are
Well,
excellent at what they do.
and I'm glad you're picky because it is pretty intimidating. I will say that to sit down at the tables and judge the beers with some amazing people. Ben Edmonds was at my table. He was a captain. Julia Hertz was at a table. 2 years ago, Charlie Papazian was at the table. Uh, uh, gosh, I've just amazing people that I've gotten to judge with, and it's a pleasure to do so. But I will say it's a little intimidating because everybody's palate is different, and it's you have to think through how you're going to say, well, somebody says, well, I'm getting diacetyl, and you're going, well, I don't get it, and you have to work
You
your way
know,
through that.
it is. It's really interesting that you say that. I think one of the biggest things beyond all that experience and sort of that technical proficiency is the ability to sort of work in a, I want to, for lack of a better word, in a friendly manner. Like they play well with others and they are able to kind of, be in a group setting and not try and dominate a conversation, things like that. That's very important. I would say that's almost one of the most important pieces of being on the roster. And that's why we also, and when we do our applications, we have a reference or referral program as well. People need to have at least three references in best cases from people who are, current or past judges of these competitions that can really speak to, their quality in a group setting. So it's a big piece of it.
Well, especially for the medal rounds, because
Of
when you're
course.
awarding the medals, you can't find any warts, so to speak, in these beers. You can't.
Right.
And it's kind of like, wow, how in the world do you award gold and silver, to these, that they've gone through all these rounds, and these are fabulous beers by the time you get to a medal round. But and it does kind of bring out the do you play well together side of it because there's some strong opinions. But the great thing is there's a lot of agony that when somebody picks a beer for a medal round, it is well thought through, and I admire what you do in organizing the competition. So kudos to that. Well,
Thank you.
speaking of all that competition, uh, I've seen it change over the years. Used to be IPAs weren't hardly on the judging list. I mean, there was always a few. Then they dominated, and then juicies weren't even on the horizon, and all of a sudden now they are a large category. And I think it's an interesting perspective that you have when you just look at the entries and the people who want to compete. So, what have you learned in the past year or two as far as, what are the most competitive categories maybe for 2023, and what do you think they're going to be maybe for 2024?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, IPAs still do kind of dominate. I don't think they quite double. They get close to doubling those right behind them. But, we just introduced, maybe a while coming, but just introduced our West Coast style IPA. We broke that off from our American IPA category. That was for its first year on the competition was the second largest category right behind that juicy hazy IPA category. But then, what I find interesting behind that, it's always been kind of this, right behind the IPAs, you always have this shuffle between traditional lagers like German Pilsners, Bohemian Pilsners, things like that. There's always a really strong like wooden barrel aged category that kind of ranks like fifth, year to year it'll oscillate back and forth. But most interestingly, this year in 2023, the third largest category right behind those IPA categories, and actually larger than the American IPA category, was the light lager category, which was kind of pretty amazing to see. We've seen the past couple of years, both between World Beer Cup and GABF, that those light lagers, they're coming up there, and they're usually in the top 10 somewhere, but to have it be top three most competitive category was very interesting. Even beyond something like a German Pilsner. So that was pretty crazy to see. And yeah, I would say those are the most competitive. Anytime you see three digits in the size of our competition, anytime you see three digits worth of entries, it's going to be really competitive. But light lager was at the high 200, and then those IPA categories are like right on that 300 to 400 line. So it's pretty competitive.
Wow, that was totally unexpected. I would have never guessed it was light lagers.
Yeah.
I was guessing lagers because I've kind of noticed that trend for the past couple of years. But I really figured you were going to tell me it was Pilsners and not light lagers. Wow. Well, what do you
Sure.
think it's going to be in 2024? What's your hunch? What are you preparing
Oh,
for?
I still think lagers are going to come out strong. I think we'll see a really close lineup of like the same things. It depends, it kind of depends on the competition. If we're looking at a GABF, I think we see things that kind of push a little bit more closer to what we might see, at home a little bit. So IPAs on top with lagers following close behind. And the light lager thing is really interesting, but I think it maybe kind of speaks to what we might see a little bit more in the market, and what is more accessible to people. But I'd think for GABF, we're going to see really similar. We'll see our IPAs on top, Pilsner, like whether it be a German Pilsner, or if you're getting down into like light lagers, that might be there. But I bet it looks really similar. Um, and I would say the same for World Beer Cup this year. I'm hoping to see a little bit of a different thing. In the past, like last year, sometimes that German Hefeweizen, like German wheat beers, will sneak up and get a little bit up there. And this year we, in World Beer Cup, decided to break out. We used to be a bunch of different subcategories of different, whether it be color variations or strength variations in German wheat beers. We broke that out to their own individual categories, which I hope we see a really good response to that, because it's really cool. Definitely across the pond, we see a lot of folks who really appreciate that and see them all as different beer styles. So we'll judge them as separate beer styles and hopefully see a good response with that.
So it may not be one of the biggest, but what are you seeing as far as like a trending one? When you think that one day maybe not the biggest, but significant, and in the past it's been insignificant.
I think some of the more interesting ones that we've seen in the past, which we don't, so to speak, in our competition right now, we don't have an exact, like it's not its own standalone category, but see a lot of things like Italian Pils coming up, like Italian Pilsner,
Sure.
essentially like a dry hop German Pilsner. You see a lot of those both on the market, and we see them in competition. And I think would venture to say that we will see. I think they're kind of like Brewers beers, like the Brewers like to drink them, but I think you'll start to see a pickup in sort of those dark lagers, like I think like Czech Dark, like Tmave Pivos, things like that. Yep. So I would venture to bet that, and those currently kind of fall in our international dark lager category in our competitions, and I see that steadily grow. So, I would love it if that one kind of just ramped up and this is one of the top ones, but you see a lot more interest, I think, with those both on the brewer side and a little bit on the consumer side too. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see that gain some speed.
Well, I look forward to that because your competitions are just so well run and it is fun. But as a judge, you really don't have those perspectives. You got your slate of beers, your medal round, or whatever it is, and that's the visibility we have. But as we talk about those, let's talk about some specific categories. As you mentioned, World Beer Cup was earlier. GABF was just a few months ago. A lot of people might be interested in hearing, even though I know it's already announced, but IPAs and Pilsners, some of the biggest categories. Who were the big winners there? Were there any particular breweries?
Sure. Well, remember we have almost 8 different IPA categories, but I'll speak to the largest ones that we have out there. The Juicy Hazy IPA, which was the largest category, was won by 1852 Brew Company out of Azalea, California. It was a kind of one of those, where'd those guys come from? But
Yeah.
pretty amazing victory. That's a cool thing to walk away with. In West Coast IPA, it was Westbound and Down out of Colorado or Idaho Springs in Colorado. In the American IPA category, which again kind of dipped down to I think 5th largest category in the competition, but still impressive, was Fatheads out of Ohio. They took that, and then you mentioned Pilsner. The German Pilsner was Lazarus Brewing out of Austin, Texas, which was a pretty cool win for them. And then because we're talking about the large categories, I'll just throw out that light lager one.
Yeah,
It was
please.
the Nashville Light, I believe, out of Nashville Brewing. So pretty cool to see all those.
The significance of winning one of these competitions can't be understated. I mean, we talked about 100,000 beers overall, but chances are same people that entered GABF, at least the domestic ones, also enter the World Beer Cup. So, and you've mentioned some names, some that were maybe less familiar to people. They aren't actually the big breweries and the big branded ones. So a little brewery that you'd never heard of, when they win a GABF gold, a medal of any sort, because there's not a big difference between silver and gold and bronze. Everybody thinks there is. But, when we're judging them, it's arm wrestling to pick out which one is rarely
Right.
one obviously that should be lower than the other. So getting a GABF or World Beer Cup, even more so, I know how significant it is, but how would you explain it to somebody that goes to, what was it, 1852?
Yeah.
And how would you help them appreciate what a GABF medal means?
Well, like one of the most interesting things is any medal in any year, it kind of serves as just kind of this. I would say it's almost a benchmark year to year of that brewers kind of look to. So, and it means a certain thing in the eye of consumers kind of see like, oh my gosh, they just won gold at the Great American Beer Festival or the World Beer Cup or whatever, and they may or may not know what that means, but they know it means something. So it's something important to them. But I think almost even more importantly is it. Other brewers look to that and they know, like when they see that winner announced or something, they might start looking into that and it kind of serves as inspiration. So they might start to inspire other breweries and other breweries as they see some brewery pick up a medal, maybe in a category they love or some highly competitive category, they might start looking a little closer at that brewery, whether it be for inspiration or to see what they're doing, like what other things are they making, and so it kind of helps foster this, little bit of creativity and a little bit of continual everybody's trying to improve continually and kind of just up their game, and they might be looking towards those award winners to kind of see what are they doing that we're not, or what, how can we kind of like try and get along those lines and where can we make some improvements. So it's I think what it really does in the eyes of the others in the industry, I think it really kind of like shines a light on that and says, wow, you guys are doing something right. Maybe we should take a look at that.
I'm in a lot of breweries. I know you'd be surprised at that, and
Sure.
but not a large percentage of them enter GABF, much less World Beer Cup.
Right.
What would you tell a smaller brewery that thinks, "Oh, I can't win," or don't even know where to start, but they wanted to, they're toying with the idea, but they can't quite get started. How would you advise them to move forward if they wanted to enter one of the Brewers Association competitions?
I would say you never know how good your beers are. I mean, you know how good your beers are in your brewery, but you never really know until you enter. And I would venture to guess that a large portion of winners out there, there's a lot out there that might be those small breweries that have recently or historically taken home a medal that probably thought the same thing. But it just takes one time where you put a good beer out there and it makes it all the way through, and maybe it takes home a medal. So you don't know until you try. And I would urge anybody that thinks that they make great beer to definitely give it a try, because like I said, you just never know, and you could be very, very pleasantly surprised, because as you know, Doug, the judging is just completely blind. It is, we get comments. I just had gotten an inquiry the other day, like asking like how are certain breweries awarded and all this stuff, and it's fun to explain how it is blind judging. It goes through multiple rounds through different judges, and any given everything is just blind. We obscure any entry information that might be there that might identify the beer. So the beer is really it's standing alone as the liquid in the glass in front of the eyes of those judges and the palates of those judges. So if it's a good beer, it's going to show. So I think I would urge people to make that jump if you're thinking about it, because you never know.
Well, and I'll also say there isn't a round that we don't have that you don't remind us about writing comments on the beer. Can you describe what kind of feedback the small brewers never entered before, but there's some effort and expense to enter their beer, and they may think, well, what am I going to get back? Can you describe what they get back?
For sure. So, as you mentioned, all beers go through multiple rounds of judging, anywhere from, rarely 2 rounds anymore, usually 3 to 5 rounds of judging. And on that first round, every beer gets written or now sort of digital typed feedback on that beer from each judge. So you're getting feedback from other expert industry members that are looking at that beer, kind of talking about how it stacks up against that defined style guideline. And it might, even if it doesn't come out advancing or something like that, you may gain some very valuable insight as to, maybe where it's kind of off in those parameters, or where there might be room for improvement. So,
well, and I kudos to you on the digital upgrades. That was the first time I'd used your platform when we were at GABF, and people over there who have received my score sheets in the past will be thrilled to know that they'll actually be able to read your computerized ones now, because that seemed to work really well. Kudos for that.
Right. Well, thanks very much. Yep, that was it was a big hurdle this year, and we think it was a good improvement, and there's still room to kind of continually improve on that too. So,
well, and it's great feedback. So I would encourage the breweries that are out there that if they've never entered GABF before, or maybe they've entered in the past and they weren't thrilled with what they got back, a lot of the things you're doing, Chris, I think are really continuing to improve what's already a great competition.
Well, thanks for saying that, Doug. And yeah, like I said, we're just continuing to try and improve it too. And, I'll throw out there too that anybody who, those folks who maybe have reasons why they don't, it's always good to hear that and, know what might be done to improve it. Can't say we can always do that stuff, but it's always helpful to kind of know where those areas are, where we can kind of like make it more acceptable for everybody,
So, Chris, the next big competition is World Beer Cup. So if somebody was listening to this and they went, wow, well, I'm not sure whether I enter the Great American Beer Festival or the World Beer Cup. Maybe I should go for the World. What would your recommendation be? What is the different categories, the two competitions? How would you differentiate the two? How would a brewery decide which they enter? and then the significance of winning a World Beer Cup versus the Great American Beer Festival.
Well, as you know, as the name would imply, the World Beer Cup does feature entries from all around the world. So, Great American Beer Festival is strictly U.S. breweries, which is a great way to see, um, how how those beers are stacking up to kind of what we do. Style wise, we keep most of the style guidelines similar. We may group certain categories together, or like I said, for World Beer Cup, like we've kind of broken out different German and Belgian style categories that for GABF we might push together a little bit more. Um, but yeah, I would say it's important to think about your say you make a goose or a Belgian sour style beer, it may be going up on the table against an actual Belgian brewer that is excels in those beers. But the cool thing about that is you make an excellent beer that not only does well, maybe takes home a medal against that beer too. So it's I find that to be the most fascinating part about World Beer Cup, because not only are the entries from all around the world, our judge panels from all around the world. So you have panelists who are experts in the field for a given style category. I'm proud to say that, like, for certain categories, we have those at the table who almost help develop certain styles and have a very firm understanding of those. And getting feedback from those type of people on your beer, whether you win or not, is invaluable. You just it's a great takeaway. So World Beer Cup, it has a special place in my heart just because it's cool and it kind of brings together a community from all around the world, both on the entrance side and on the judge side. But Great American Beer Festival is just a great way to showcase, if you take home a medal, to showcase yourself in your home country and, in the GABF. And, I think there are a lot of people out there who watch what's going on in the GABF and that they may just plan their next vacation, based around where those medals land. And you could get some more visitors to the brewery. So, it's a tough call. It's a toss up in my mind. They both have their attractiveness to me, but it just kind of depends on if you're trying to go for gold against the rest of the world, or show how good you're doing in the U.S.
Well, and those are coming up. So can you describe when they need to get in entries if a brewery is interested, or if there is a someone who would like to judge? Can you talk about those deadlines just a little bit, approximate? I realize you may not have them at your fingertips.
Sure. Yeah, sure thing. So World Beer Cup registration is currently going on. We actually just opened up on Tuesday, so November 7th. It goes through December 6th. So it's open. We've got a good long registration window for people, but get your beers in during that time if you think you want to go toe to toe against the brewers in the rest of the world. And then GABF registration opens up a little later. It opens up in June, July of 2024. So you've got some time for that. And then you had mentioned about judges. We do have an ongoing just long list of applications. We're always accepting applications, but right now, to get through all those and rotating through the panel, we have a great panel as it is, but we do try and rotate in about anywhere from 10 to 15% new judges each competition. But what that means is that even if you put in an application now, it may be a couple of years until you're maybe asked to join the panel if you're accepted. So if you are interested in judging, better to get that application in now, so that maybe a few years down the line, we could have you join us.
And be sure to have that sensory training, right?
For sure. Yep. I will preface that by saying that not every application is accepted, and make sure that you do fit the bill for that. So.
Well, if I get invited back, I'll look forward to doing that again. You run a great competitions. Again, kudos for switching over to the digital. I thought that worked extremely well. We had a few glitches, but I've seen worse. So,
yeah. Well, it's good to hear. Yeah. Like I said, we'll continue to tighten it up too.
Well, you guys run a great competition. I would encourage everybody out there that if you're interested in judging, certainly get out there and apply. If you're not quite prepared yet, as Chris said, get in those century and judge at homebrew competitions and local competitions as much as you can to get your experience up. And I would encourage the breweries, just like Chris said, get your beer out there. Chris, you put it a great way. You never know how good it is. And it's encouraging to hear who won gold just in the current year. I mean, they're not the big brands like you would expect it would.
Yep, there's a lot of good beer out there, so we want to see it because it's always cool to see those sort of sleepers. So
I like that. Sleepers. Well,
yep,
Chris, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy. Thank you for putting
sure
up
thing.
with me at the competitions. And I look forward to hearing about how World Beer Cup went. Maybe we can talk about that after that was over and get your takeaways from the competitions and what you're seeing from kind of worldwide trends from the competition.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me, Doug. It's been great talking with you today.
Well, thank you, Chris. Cheers.
Yep. Cheers.
I want to know what you think about Chris's opinion on the rising popularity of craft light lagers. It really was a big surprise to me. And if you found value in this video, please smash that like button. It really supports us in creating more content like this. And check out these videos on the screen. They've been carefully selected just for you, and they're filled with even more brewing insights and tips. Thank you and cheers.